Okay, so this video is going to be covering Chapter 5 of Groundwork for a Better Vocabulary. I encourage you to follow along in your book because you can make the marks there because the questions are the same. So we're on page 34. So starting off, just to read out these words, and you can take a guess as to their part of speech. The first one here is aggravate, and that ends in ate with the 8 sound, so consider that. Cease, coincide, considerable, that one ends in able, which is a clue. Humane, intentional, that ends in that al, which can often be a clue. Interference, ending in enc. Obnoxious, that's ending in ous. Unstable, even though that one ends in able, that's not necessarily a clue. And the last one is utilize, and that ends in ize, which is a clue as well. Alright, so going through this first one, aggravate. This is a verb, and again this ends in that 8 sound, making it a verb. If you walk on a sprained ankle, you'll only aggravate the injury. The pain and the swelling will get worse. My boss is already annoyed at me for losing some important papers, so I don't want to aggravate the situation by asking her for a day off. So what aggravate means is it means to make something worse. If you look on page 35, aggravate is number 5, which is the same definition, to make worse. But aggravate has is normally used with things like problems or injuries or a mistake, making something worse. So we're not really, it's not like if you're drawing a painting, you don't aggravate it, meaning you make it bad. Aggravate means that something is already bad and you're making it even more bad. So in the first example, it's the sprained ankle. This person has hurt their ankle, so if they continue to walk on it, the pain is going to get worse. So this is an example of an injury. And the second one is it's a problem situation, right? The situation is that I lost some important papers, so the boss is annoyed or angry with me. So I don't want to make the that situation or that problem even worse. So keep that in mind. Aggravate means to make something that's already bad more bad or worse. So moving on to the next one is cease, and this one is also a verb. After the police warned him twice, our landlord ceased burning trash in the backyard, an illegal activity in our town. When the snowfall finally ceased, we went out to shovel the driveway. So what cease means is something to stop. But the definition on 35 is number 2, to stop, discontinue, or quit. So in this case, what stop means to bring something to an end. So when something ceases, it means it's an activity or an event that was continuing, and when it ceases, it is stopped. So in the first example, the activity that's continuing is the landlord is burning trash in the backyard. And it ceased when the landlord stops doing that. In the first example, the activity that's going on is snowfall or snowing, and when it ceases, that means that it is stopped. There is a legal order called a cease and desist order, which you may have heard of before. What that means is that you're doing something and the court is saying you have to stop doing it. So it could be that you're building a building and the government says you can't build the building, so they will give you a cease and desist order, meaning that you have to stop doing that thing. So the one thing to really keep in mind is that, if you just have this one definition, stop, you may say I ceased the car, where you could say I stopped the car, but you're not going to say I ceased the car, because cease means to stop doing something. So you could say I ceased driving the car, but that means that I didn't get in it and drive. It doesn't mean I stopped it at a stop sign. So always be careful about these one-word definitions because they don't capture the full meaning of the word. So the next one is coincide, and this one is also a verb. Now, I'll talk about the parts of this word that may help you remember it. The first one is my best friend and I have moved to the different states. We try to make our visits to our hometown coincide so that we can see each other. Our neighbor is getting married on the same day as my cousin. I wish the weddings were not going to coincide because I'd really like to go to both. What coincide means is to happen at the same time. On page 35, it's number 7, which is the exact same definition, to happen at the same time. But coincide, the co part of coincide means with. In other words you've heard like this are cooperate. Cooperate means to work with someone else. So coincide has two parts, co and inside, which it comes from the word incidence, not inside as opposed to outside. Incident means an event. Something that happens. So coincide means that there's two, or it could be more than two events that are taking place at the same time. So that's the important thing, is that there's two or more events and that they're happening at the same time. Our next one here is considerable, and this one ends in able, and that tells us that it's an adjective when you see that at the end of the word. After 2 hours and considerable effort, I finally found Vernon's apartment. Elena loves gardening, so she spends a considerable amount of time caring for flowers, vegetables, and herbs. What considerable means is quite a bit. On page 35 it says rather great or rather large. So considerable basically means a lot. And it could be a lot of effort like in the first one, or it could be a lot of something. So in the first example we're saying after 2 hours and considerable effort, this means that I put a lot of work into looking for the apartment. In the second one, she spends a considerable amount of time caring for flowers. That means she spends a lot of time. Another way to think of this word considerable is to think of it as notably large in size, amount, or extent. So considerable could be the size of something, right? So that something is very big. It could be the amount of something, meaning the number or the length of something. And it could also be the extent of something, meaning, again, a different way of saying how big something is. But the important thing is, like, considerable means a lot. Our next word here is humane. Now this one is an adjective, and what students often get confused with is that this word looks like the word human, meaning a person, but it isn't. It's a different word and it's a different pronunciation. It's pronounced humane. In the past, zoo animals were usually kept in bare concrete cages. In an attempt to be more humane, many zoos have built more natural, comfortable animal housing. When our cat developed a fatal blood disease, we didn't want her to suffer. We felt it was more humane to have her painlessly put to sleep. And what humane means is caring. On page 35 it's number 6. Kind, sympathetic, merciful, gentle. One of the ways that I remember when I was first learning this word that helped me to remember it is that even though it doesn't mean human, the way that I think of it is if you are acting humane, you're treating someone or something like a human, or treating someone or something like you would want to be treated. So in the first example, before they had the animals in concrete cages, this is not a comfortable environment that we would want to be living in. So to make a more humane environment is giving them an environment that is more natural or more comfortable for them. In the second one, the cat is sick and is in pain, so the kind thing to do, the generous thing to do, would be to put the cat to sleep, or to kill the cat with an injection, so that it doesn't have to suffer. Another meaning for humane is having or showing compassion or benevolence, or basically the same idea of being very kind to someone is being humane. All right, so our next word here is intentional, and this one ends in al, which often means an adjective, which is what it is. The police believe the fire was intentional, although they don't know why someone would purposely burn down the movie theater. I know I'm an hour late, but it wasn't intentional. A huge traffic accident held me up. What intentional means is planned. And if we think back, we've already learned a word that means basically the same thing, which is deliberate, done on purpose. Intentional is number 4 on page 35, done on purpose or planned. So in the first example, it says the police believe the fire was intentional, meaning this was not an accidental fire. Someone on purpose, deliberately, set the fire to the building. In the second example, it says I'm not late. I'm not late on purpose, right? It's because of traffic. So I say it wasn't intentional, which means that it was accidental. I didn't plan to do this. I didn't plan to be late. Okay, so moving on to the next one here. This is interference. Now this one ends in ENC, which is a clue for us most of the times that it's a noun. Because the street worker outside our class windows, because the street workers outside our classroom windows were such an interference, the class was moved to the library. My mom rarely gets involved in my arguments with my brother and sister. You must learn to settle your own problems without my interference, she says. So interference means getting in the way. On page 35, it's number 9, and it's got an actual really long definition. The act of getting in the way of something, meddling in someone else's business, something that gets in the way. So interference comes from the word interfere. To interfere literally means to get in the way. Interfere means that you're doing something that is causing a problem between two things. So in the first example, right, the two things that are trying to go on is that the teacher is trying to teach the students, but the people outside the window are distracting the students. So we're saying that there's an interference because it's interfering with the learning between the students and the teacher. In the second example, the mother says she doesn't want to interfere. She doesn't want they need to get along without her interference. So this is, the conversation between the two siblings. The mother doesn't want to get in the way or be in the middle of those things. Interference is, the action of interfering, or the process of being interfered with. Generally, when we talk about interference, we're saying that it's not a good thing. Another meaning of interference that you may hear is you can talk about digital interference. So sometimes if you're watching TV and if the TV gets all fuzzy, this is interference, which means that there's something that is getting in the way between the signal coming to your television and your television. So it's interfering in that way. So again, interference is generally a bad thing. So our next word here is obnoxious. Now, obnoxious ends in OUS, which makes it an adjective. Most of the time, those words are adjectives. So the children visiting the chicken farm held their noses because of the obnoxious smell. I won't go to the party if Lester is there. He always makes himself obnoxious by insulting and making fun of people. So what obnoxious means is not pleasant or unpleasant. On page 35, obnoxious is number 1. It says very unpleasant, distasteful, or disgusting. So in these two sentences, we have two different meanings, uses of obnoxious. In the first one, we say that the smell was obnoxious, meaning that the smell was very, very unpleasant, not very nice. In the second one, we're talking about somebody's behavior being obnoxious, meaning that they are not pleasant. So obnoxious can mean either of those things. It can be something that is unintentional, right, like a smell, but is very unpleasant, or it can be something intentional, like someone's behavior that is very unpleasant. Other ways to think about this is that, obnoxious means disagreeable or offensive, or distasteful or terrible or awful, any of those words. But basically, obnoxious is not is not a compliment. It's a word that is used to describe a thing or a behavior that is unpleasant. So our next one here is unstable. Now this one does end in able, and it does happen to be an adjective, but it's actually it's actually in this case not a clue. But anyway, the ladder felt so unstable that I was afraid to climb any higher than the third step. The young man's personality was unstable. One minute he seemed quiet and satisfied, and the next minute he was angry about something. So what unstable means is not steady. It's number 3 on page 35. Unsteady, steady, wobbly, not reliable. So in this we have sort of two different usages of unstable. So we can talk about something physically that's unstable, and the picture in this one sort of shows something that's physically unstable, meaning that if we are standing on it, we would fall down. Or in this example, the ladder was unstable, meaning that it wasn't steady, that it wasn't strong. But we can also talk about someone's personality being unstable, meaning that it changes in a way that is not easy to predict. You don't know which way it's going to change. So we can think of unstable as something that's prone to change. Prone means likely, something that is likely to change, fall, or give away, meaning break. So one example would be, say in our classroom, if I was to stand on my desk where the computer was, we'd say that is fairly stable, right? But if I was to stand on one of the desks that you sit at, that's unstable, meaning I could get up there and be fine, but it could just as easily fall down and crash. So again, just like we said with obnoxious, unstable is generally not a good thing to be, because it's not predictable. We don't know. It's not safe. It's not steady in either behavior or physically. Okay, and then our last word here is utilize. And this one is an IZE word, and those ones tend to be verbs, and this one is a verb as well. Don't throw bread away just because it's stale. Stale bread can be utilized to make breadcrumbs and croutons. Last summer, Cindy utilized her swimming skills as a camp lifeguard. Well, utilize means to use. On page 35, it's number 10. To make use of, put to use, especially to good use. Another way to think of utilize is to make practical and effective use of. So utilize doesn't just mean use in a general sense, but utilize means to use something for a good purpose or for a practical purpose. So in the first example, when bread becomes stale, what that means is that after you have bread, it becomes hard, right? So it's not going to be good for making sandwiches, right? but it may be good for something else, for breadcrumbs and croutons. Croutons are those things that they put on salads, but the dried bread can be put to a good use. In the second one, Cindy utilizes her swimming skills, so she uses her ability to swim to be a lifeguard. So she puts it to a good use. So utilize means to use something, but to use it in a good way, or in a smart way, or in a practical way. All right, so go ahead and finish off the questions, the vocabulary questions, and then bring any questions that you have about any of these words to class, and we'll discuss them. All right, take care. Bye.